What do you do when someone you trust is stabbed right in front of you, and the only thing left in your hands is a charm they believe would bring you and your comrades back home in one piece? Welcome to Talk Manga Daily, where we go beyond the panel. Today, we're diving into GACHIAKUTA Volume 3, Part 1, covering chapters 14 through 17, and this is the Raider's Trap arc, and it does not hold back or disappoint. If you haven't watched our breakdowns for Volume 1 and 2, those are already up on the channel. Volume 1 introduced us to Rudo's fall and awakening. Volume 2 gave us our first real taste of the cleaners, the pit, and the power system that governs the world. But Volume 3 is where emotion, power, and purpose start to collide. Let's jump in. So, Chapter 14, titled The Arrival, we open in a wrecked underground level, probably part of the building that collapsed back in Volume 2. It almost looks like an old parking lot structure, thick concrete, support pillars, exposed wiring, broken beams stretching across the ceiling. Rudo, Gris, and the third support are moving cautiously but with urgency. They're still searching for a missing Zanka. There's no sign of him. And as they press forward, they reach an emergency door tucked neatly into a wall. It opens, revealing a staircase that seems to lead to another level. But just as they're processing, everything in their head, they hear footsteps. Someone is approaching from behind them. And they spin around and they see exactly who it is. It's a man, a raider walking toward them in the same tunnel that they just came through. Tall dreadlocks, swaying movements, no rush in his step, no panic. His presence is quiet but heavy. He stops a few paces away, then raises his hands and points directly at Rudo. And Gris immediately steps in between them. He says, like, who are you? Like, Gris's tone is sharp and protective, but the man doesn't answer him. The raider doesn't answer him. He keeps pointing still at Runo, and the tension, of course, is spiking between Gris and the raider. Suddenly, the raider burst into motion, scaling the wall behind them in one movement, moving up around behind them where the emergency door is built. Rudo whips his head around, eyes locking on him, and that's when the raider says from above, "You're the one, the giver, the one from the spear." And at this point, Zonka's still missing, and Rudo's very aware of that. And he's like, there was a cleaner with a stick. What did you do to him? And of course, the raider responds and says, don't worry. I'm really nice to guys who look tough. I only put him to sleep. I didn't kill him. But he does go on to say that maybe his poison was a little too strong for Zonka. Rudo's rage is just getting started. And his rage is burning. But Gris is the one who acts first and he pays for it. The raider, of course, drives his claws straight into Gris's stomach. Gris did try to take the raider on, and the claws ran him through. The panel doesn't pull away at all. We see the blades exit Gris's back. Rudo sees it too, and that's when his ability again begins to awaken. So here are our thoughts regarding what we're seeing in chapter 14. This isn't just a physical injury. Gris represents duty, mentorship, and stability. When the raider calls him just a gruntling and says he's worth nothing, it hits hard, and it hits to a core theme in GACHIAKUTA. What does it mean to be discarded? Gris, like the trash from the spear, is treated as if his life has no meaning. But in that moment, Rudo sees value, and that's the exact point where his powers flares up, or like we like to say, they come to life. Chapter 15 is titled Deep Down. We're pulled immediately into a flashback, a beautiful but heartbreaking flashback. A young Arudo is banging his head against the wall. Recto, his adopted father, stops him and says, why are you hurting yourself? How does this make any sense, Rudo? Rudo doesn't have any words to explain what he's feeling, just that it's eating him up in the inside. And on this manga panel, Rudo does turn when Recto stops him, and you can see he has a nosebleed from banging his head against a wall, but his forehead is also bruised. So this is a little heartbreaking to watch at the same time. And like I just mentioned, Rudo doesn't have any words to explain what he's feeling, how to describe like what's going on in terms of emotion inside of him. Recto is awesome, so he doesn't lecture, he listens, and then he says something profound. One of the reasons you feel like you have nothing is that you haven't found something that you like. So starting today, we're going to find things that you like. So what does this mean? So this is a big turning point for Rudo because he starts to take Rudo outside and spend more time with Rudo on their side of the spear. So Rudo stumbles, or Rudo notices the gate that separates the tribe folk from the regular folk. And looking through the gate, he notices something that looks like a trash chute where discarded items um, are put in. So, and he runs toward the gate and he opens the gate, and Recto doesn't know what's gotten into him. But he opens the gate, goes to that trash chute where he just saw the regular people putting things in, and he pulls something out of it. And he starts to cry. He says, "It's not broken, not really, but someone threw it away anyway." And for Rudo, this feels like a mirror into himself. Its life wasn't over, this poor thing. And he says to Recto, "I want to fix it." And Recto has this surprising look on his face. But it's then that Recto understands what Rudo is feeling. So here's our thoughts at Talk Manga Daily regarding this piece of the flashback because it is emotional, and the mangaka did a really great job of drawing it and presenting it. So this is what makes Rudo different. While others treat broken things as waste, he sees potential, the discarded, the overlooked. That moment with the trash is not just about sentiment, it's the spiritual birth of his identity as a giver. It's about restoration. So back in the present moment, Rudo picks up an object, and it wasn't just any object. It was the charm that Gris dropped when um, Jabber stabbed him through the torso, and his eyes ignite. Like Rudo eyes does this red thing, and we've seen it in the anime, but you notice it on the manga panel because of how well the mangaka has drawn it, that something happens with his eyes before his ability activates. And Gris is on the ground, coughing up blood, and realizes by looking at Rudo, looking at his eyes, and looking at what's happening now with the charm in the palm of his hand and the transformation that's happening with it, he starts to smile. Gris starts to smile. And he says, "Your power is not to create vital instruments, it's to find the worth in what you touch and draw out its maximum extent." And this is how chapter 15 ends, not in a scream, but with a revelation. Chapter 16 is titled "It's a Hit." So the Raider is looking at Rudo with what he's done with taking the charm that fell off of Gris when the Raider attacked him, and he's turned it into this massive vital instrument. And the Raider's looking at him like, "Damn, that's cool." But Rudo isn't quite done yet. He remembers Gris's word that shook him out of his reverie or out of his despair. And those words were, "There must be something that you've always wanted to do." So Rudo was thinking at this time that if Gris hadn't asked him that question, he'd still be mad and lashing out at everything. And then he turns to the Raider and he thinks, but it's different now. So he points at the Raider and he says, "I reject everything you said, and I'll accept everything you reject. And therefore, I'm going to kick your ass." So now Rudo is ready to answer with his fist. At this point, we get the full name of the Raider, and it's Jabba Longer. His smile is unhinged, and his words are erratic, but his obsession is real. He wants to play with Rudo before dragging him back Combat erupts between Jabber and Rudo, and Jabber notices something strange. He notices that his attacks aren't landing on Rudo. Rudo hasn't even moved. He hadn't even been touched. The object he picked up, it was Griss's charm, as we know, the one that he prayed over for everyone to return safely. Rudo doesn't just see it as a weapon, he sees it as a wish. And he turns that wish into his defense. So now this vital instrument is a defense for Rudo. So Jabber's attacks aren't landing. And if making it home in one piece means that no one gets hurt, then the enemy shouldn't land a single attack. So that was Rudo's thought with creating this defense, that this defense was necessary to make sure all the current cleaners involved in this battle, to include, of course, the supporters, make it back home. So these are our thoughts at this moment. So this is where Gachiakuta blends emotion with mechanics. Rudo's power isn't about brute force, it's empathetic resonance. His instrument becomes a shield because it means, or it's meant to protect. So that's how personal, how thematic, and how beautiful this power system really is. And Jabber's confused, off balance, and Rudo drops a killer line at this point. He says, "I'm not the one who's been moving. You are, Jabber." Then comes the uppercut from Rudo, powered not by anger alone, but clarity. And this is the end of chapter 16. Chapter 17 is titled Stabby, Stabby Claws. And this chapter opens up, of course, Jabber is now trying to hit Rudo, land punches on him. So Jabber's jumping from the floor to the walls, speedballing across the environment, using the walls, floors, everything he can. And Rudo's kind of like just still standing there in a defense mode. And he's watching him, his every movement. So at one point, Rudo notices and kind of gets the pattern down. And he makes good on his promise. He hits Jabber with his fist, sending him flying. Jabber hits the wall hard, nose bleeding, but this dude is still laughing. And he says, "Oh, I haven't been beaten this good in ages." And this man is intoxicated off the pain of Rudo's punch. And Jabber stares at Rudo with wild eyes, and then he drops a theory. He says, "Your instrument detects hostility and redirects it, right?" And Rudo is like, "So?" And then Jabber says, "So what if there's no hostility? What if there's no conscious thought?" And then somehow, some way, Jabber knocks himself out deliberately. And he just starts wrecking things. And he's thinking, would your vital instrument still react? And this is kind of where chapter 17 ends, with Jabber fading. Maybe unconscious, maybe not, but ready to test this like twisted theory or idea that he has regarding Rudo's vital instrument structure. Here's some thoughts regarding Jabber. Jabber's terrifying, not because of his strength, but because of how far he'll go to game the system, basically. He's forcing Rudo to question his power, to question the rules that define his safety. And for a moment, we're left with a question: can something still be dangerous when it stops thinking? So Jabber is going to be an interesting character, and we can't look, we're excited to look forward to see what this villain is going to be like. I think everyone likes a good villain that's challenging as much as we like the protagonists, main characters, and all the other players in the story. But everybody, we all kind of like this good villain or a good villain. And Gachiakuta has introduced a really interesting one. This wraps up part 1 of Gachiakuta Volume 3, where we covered chapters 14 through 17. And these first few chapters have been quite the ride. I mean, we saw Griss's sacrifice, the emotional blueprint of Rudo's power, and a raider whose strategy may be more dangerous than his poisonous claws. The next part, which is part 2, will cover chapters 18 through 22. And this is where we believe the fallout will begin. Because if Jabber's theory is correct, Rudo's greatest gift may become his greatest vulnerability. So stick around. Part 2 is coming soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you caught something we may have missed, or if you're reading on your own. What do you think about this series? What do you think makes this series so special? This is Talk Manga Daily, bringing you Gachiakuta. Thanks for watching.